everybody. Welcome to this edition of CareNet TV. It's a blessing to be with you. Today I have Deborah McGregor Caperton from Waco, Texas. She's going to talk a little bit about what she's doing and the amazing work that's happening in her part of the country. Great to be with you, Deborah.
Hi, good to be with you.
Good. Now, first off, tell us a little bit about, just so your background. It's a little unique compared to some of the other backgrounds of folks who are doing this work. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I am a licensed attorney, and I came to CareNet back in 2006, thinking that I would do some ministry work before I returned back to full-time law practice after having my last daughter. And I remember my husband saying, "Why don't you just volunteer?" And I said, "Do you know how much it costs when I volunteer anywhere?" And he goes, Yeah, go ahead and work for him. So I was just thinking I was going to do a little ministry work until I returned to full-time law practice, and that's been 16 years ago. I am ruined for this. I mean, I see God move in such big and powerful ways. I mean, how can you not be hooked? So I do still keep my law practice up, and I do still represent clients that are that don't have an attorney, maybe in CPS court or traffic court or trying to get outstanding warrants cleared up. So I do still get to use it, but I tell them that you get what you pay for. So the full disclosure.
Well, good. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, it is. I don't know how many attorneys there are that are doing this work, but it's great to have you as part of the team. And I know just some of the other times when I've engaged with you, just the insight that you have, that your law practice background brings to the table is really special and really important. So tell me a little bit about your pregnancy center, how you guys got started, and just a little bit about the sort of the nature of the work that you do in Waco.
Well, the center was established in 1984 after Roe versus Wade, and a group of Christian, like many pregnancy centers, just sat around a living room and said, "What can we do to give women an alternative to abortion?" And it's grown from there. They became an affiliate of CareNet National, I believe, in around 2000. And when I came, pretty much the model was we were a pregnancy medical clinic. So we were doing ultrasounds, our pregnancy tests and ultrasounds. We were all in one office, and it was pretty much a one-on-one basis as clients would come in, whether, depending on what they were looking for. They might be life-minded, which means they were excited about the pregnancy, but they needed a lot of support. And they may have been considering abortion, which we would call abortion-minded. And we wanted to, if given permission, discuss the risk and alternatives to that. So that's how it was when I came. In order to be more efficient with our resources and our staff, and also with the client's time, we really decided that we didn't want to be the church for the clients, and we didn't want to be their only support and community. So we believed that we could build a community of wise women to support each other outside the center, maybe babysit for each other, build trust with each other. And so we, rather than sending our clients off with a referral list to the Medicaid office or the WIC office or Attorney General's office, we started a family abuse office. We started inviting those agencies to come into our center, provided good food, incentives for classes, and let them apply for those services in a nice, clean, respectable environment, and not just send our clients off with the myriad of problems that they had. That was very successful, and we did begin building community and saw the moms building community. And so we decided to add case management services so that we could kind of get more in the weeds of why this particular pregnancy was a crisis. And what we found was most times, there were barriers in transportation, income, childcare, and housing. So we started working with those agencies very personally. If we made a referral, we would call ahead, and then we would call behind that referral and see how it went. And so what we found, the one thing that we could not overcome was housing in Waco. So there was no place for pregnant women with children to live if they were pregnant. And to encourage a mother to continue a pregnancy while she's living in her car just seemed disingenuous. And we just couldn't overcome that hurdle. So we did build a 14,000 square foot facility where we have our support services connected to what we call a guest home. And it's beautiful. We regularly house about 20 to 30 women and children. in the guest house. And we have staff here 24 hours a day, not to make them feel like they're in prison, not to watch our stuff, but to be of service to them. And generally, a mom will stay about 6 months. And during that time, we work intensively with her to get her independent. And what that means is not that she won't be on government services. She certainly will be. But she's not afraid of the police because we've gotten outstanding warrants cleared up. She can get a driver's license because we've got outstanding warrants or tickets paid. She's no longer trading her food stamps for rides or for housing or childcare because we've gotten her into those childcare services and we've gotten her paperwork. Sometimes it's just little things like a birth certificate. It's amazing what you can't do without a birth certificate, and she doesn't have $25 to pay for it. So we really just get in the weeds, and so we it's a beautiful program. We've had many moms, about generally 80 to 100, not just moms, but families or moms and children, bodies will come through the guest house a year, and we've developed a scorecard where we give them a score when they leave of 25 points for each of those 4 barriers. And generally, over the last 3 years, the average of when women leave is about 75. They've, got three of the 4 barriers, but they're still working on the 4th one. But then we follow them for 6 months, and they're in the 80s, and then we follow them at a year, and they're in the 90s. So,
well, that's just amazing. I mean, wow. I mean, what a blessing that is, and just your leadership in terms of having the vision to see the need. I'm a very big I have a very big focus in terms of how I look at things in terms of like not just solving the what, but solving the why that's leading to the what. And so often, we focus on the what, right? What can we do to help this person? Which again, that's an important thing to do, but you should be trying to get upstream and saying, why is this person needing that help to begin with? And it sounds like you've got that same perspective in terms of the way that you, as a leader, look at things. And so, from my standpoint, I mean, that's a great example. I mean, for those of you who are listening, in terms of kind of, don't get yourself so locked up into what can we do, but kind of get upstream and focus on the why.
And then, like with the scorecard is, are we, it's hard to measure when you're doing good. Are you doing any good? I mean, you might be doing things, but to look at that and say, okay, they left here at a 75, but are they on the trajectory to stay successful? And so when we see those scores improve, we know that they're on the right trajectory and that we are doing good past the point of when they leave here.
Yeah, that's just fantastic too, because one of the things that we've been sort of really working on here in terms of our work is this notion of like outcomes-based ministry, and like how can we measure outcomes and then impact as opposed to activity-based ministry, which again, activities are important, but ultimately you're trying to get to outcomes. And I just appreciate that about your leadership and your vision that you have. Now, you're in Texas, which is ground zero for certainly the life issue in terms of, hey, that's where Roe v. Wade started, right, in Texas. And obviously, what's happened in the state in terms of limiting abortion has gotten a lot of press over the years. Tell me a little bit about how that's affected you, how you guys have maybe pivoted related to that. I mean, give me a little insight into that.
Well, we're still figuring it out. We had the heartbeat law, which was back in September, which women were not allowed to get an abortion after a heartbeat was detected. So we kind of got a rush. I mean, it started making, I guess, those changes then because we started seeing, women at first were hostile and then they were just scared. And so that's kind of when our change started happening. When the Dobbs decision came down, shockingly, and I was just visiting with the staff yesterday, it's amazing how many women still don't know abortion's illegal. We started in January a hotline, really developed landing pages, revamped our website to reach out to women who were looking for abortion pills. And the hotline has not slowed. I mean, it's amazing how many women still don't know that abortion's illegal. So when they come to us, I mean, sometimes that's the first time they've heard of it. So that has not really changed, other than now they're being told it's illegal, and we have the shock and awe on the phone or when they come in of delivering that news, and then they're trying to figure out. But also, I mean, I don't remember a time in my lifetime when it would be more challenging than now to have an unexpected pregnancy, given the economy, the housing, the child care situation. Many
Yeah.
daycares closed during COVID that didn't reopen. So it's very troubling to look at the landscape to see all of the barriers that are just seem insurmountable. And so we're looking
Yeah.
at how we can affect change with our influence in the community. I mean, we have been around in this community for a long time, and we do have a good audience and politicians and things that will listen, but it's hard to turn this ship around. And
Yeah.
just in our area, we had an abortion clinic that was in our city that did 1,200 abortions a year, and now we're going to have 1,200 additional babies born. And you know, it's serious.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's why obviously we have a very important role in terms of the pregnancy center movement. Obviously, you guys are the tip of the spear. We're trying to support you in the work that you do, but it's really the church is so critically important. People coming alongside these folks facing pregnancy decisions is so key. That's really a big part of kind of the whole pro-abundant life perspective that we talk about here, and making life disciples in terms of organizing ministry teams in churches to come alongside your clients, so that you guys can be very focused on the work that you're doing.
I tell the churches, the churches that want to get involved, it's not a catch and release ministry. It's not.
That's good. And in
Yeah,
Texas,
it's not a
everybody
catch
knows
and
what that
release
means, right?
ministry. It is.
Yes, that's a good phrase. I will steal that from you. I will
Yeah,
footnote.
I
Deborah,
think I stole it from somewhere,
I love
but
that.
yeah,
That is so good.
it's
That is so
very
good.
much.
Yeah.
The church
Yeah.
and we do have churches that are engaged, and it can be messy. It can be messy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's not the role that's not the model that Jesus exhibited. It wasn't
Right.
quote catch and release. He was always meeting people at
Hmm.
their point of need and then calling them into a discipleship relationship so they would be transformed by the
Yeah.
renewing of their mind. So it wasn't this come as you are, yes, but don't stay as you
Absolutely.
came, be transformed. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I love that.
It's,
So you
it's
may
all
hear that
yours.
again
I
in other
stole it, I'm
things. I
sure.
love that. Oh, that's fantastic. So tell me, as we kind of close up, like maybe a few two things I want to kind of close up with. One is maybe an obstacle or a couple obstacles that you guys are facing now that you're wrestling through, and particularly, I always like to try to use these venues to kind of get a better understanding of how folks like yourself, like how you approach obstacles, how you think about them, how you wrestle with them, and to come to a conclusion. So what's something that you guys are really working on now, an obstacle that you're finding in your ministry with your team, whether it's staffing or facilities or finance, that you're wrestling with? And tell me a little bit about kind of your approach to how you're addressing it,
Yeah,
even if you haven't
yeah.
solved it, but just how you're trying to address that.
Well, we began during COVID. We have a beautiful big RV that a mobile outreach. We call it our mobile outreach. And so during COVID, we started going out because our office was closed. So we started going out into the communities and taking our medical services and our support services. And I say into the communities. We have 6 counties that surround us that don't have a pregnancy center. So we started that thinking we would stop whenever COVID was over. But it has continued. And right now we're wrestling with, especially in Texas, I am convinced, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I am convinced that the new frontier for the pregnancy center movement in Texas is to have a pregnancy center presence in every county. We have, there's probably a third of the counties that don't have pregnancy centers. We have to be there. It's not going to be at the scale of
Yeah.
some pregnancy centers that are really busy in metropolitan areas,
Yeah.
but we have continued to do that. And now what we're gathering research, and we'll go into strategic planning in December to see how do we do that long term. It's not sustainable on a mobile outreach. It wears the staff out, and so all of the above. And you said staffing. I have to look at just
Yeah.
everyone's resilience, I think, is down after COVID, and it just hasn't recovered. And even with staff
Yeah.
and just the workforce, it's hard to get people motivated again. And I don't like it, and I can complain about it all day long, but that's what we have to work with. So given that, what's the best
Yeah.
use of our
No.
resources in those communities, and then hoping and praying that the churches come around And, if you see 3 or 4 women a day, consider that a success, and not,
yeah.
so that's a shift for me, because I'm all about numbers and I want to do the most with the least. But
Yeah.
that's a challenge for me to think about having a pregnancy center in a location that might only see, 4 or 5 a day instead of 20 a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I appreciate your leadership on that and your thought process as you kind of work through that. So talk to me about just a client
Yeah.
story if you've got one that just comes to mind. I always like to try to talk about those here because that's the encouragement to continue doing that. Do you have one that's top of mind in terms that you guys are working on right now?
As I told you, we have a hotline. It's I call it a hotline, but it's an email. And an email came in, and this is, again, why there need to be more pregnancy centers. Email came into our hotline from a young lady that lived in San Marcos, which is, I'm going to say, is 2 hours south of us. I don't know how we end up picking up some of them that we do out of the county, but it's difficult when we get them and we don't have some place to send them. And so this hotline came in, and this young lady had gone to Mexico, and she was someone spiked her drink, and she was raped. She came back to Texas, and she had gone to flight attendant school in Dallas, which is about an hour and a half north of us. She was in the process of relocating, moving, getting her career started, and I got this email, and late in the night, saying I was date raped in Mexico, and I'm pregnant and I need an abortion. So when we reached out to her, of course, she found out that abortion was not legal in Texas. She had already let her lease go in the city where she was living. She was going to relocate, and reaching out to her, she really appreciated, and she said, I'm going to be driving through Waco, and I'll stop and see, I'll see someone. So she stopped in, we got the full story, and she doesn't have any family, no support, and so we are connecting her with some counseling services in the Dallas area that we have worked in agreement with, and then also a pregnancy center in the Dallas area to take her and to serve her like we would. And she was very grateful, very appreciative, and just said, the fact that y'all reached out, and we kept reaching out, but that's just one of the stories that, she just didn't know where to go. She was thinking she was going to have an abortion. She came in, we're able to show her baby. She heard the heartbeat, she smiled, and, just realized for the first time that it was a baby. And so we're praying for her, and just would ask for prayers for that, because we see those all the time. So we not only deliver the news that you can have an abortion, but now what?
Right. And obviously that's one of the real challenging dynamics that we face in this work, when a situation of rape and that kind of, and certainly folks on the other side try to mean that immediately means that you have to have an abortion, and that's actually the moral thing to do, if you will, to do that. But I think one of the things that God's inspired me around that very, very difficult dynamic that you have to wrestle with first is just the central question: should the circumstances of someone's birth determine their worth? The circumstances of their conception and birth determine their worth. So if you're conceived out of lust or you're conceived out of love, does from a humanity perspective, are you less worthy of life? And I think when you start to think about it that way, it sort of frames it a bit differently than the circumstance that brought it. And you say, well, I'm making a decision based on the circumstance, as opposed to, well, wait a minute, there's a certain worth that someone who's created in the image of God has, and the circumstances of their birth should not determine their worth. And we used to think that way. It used to be sort of a perspective. That kids who were born out of wedlock were called illegitimate or bastards, for example. And frankly, the whole framework around slavery was basically built on that perspective, that the circumstance of your birth determines your worth. So you were born to a woman who's a slave, therefore that determines your worth and in the public square. And we've rejected that as a nation. Thank God. I know I'm happy about that. So I just appreciate you guys really stepping into that story in such a powerful way. So listen, it's been just a blessing to be able to spend time with you and to learn more about what you're doing. You're just an amazing leader. And I just thank you for what you're doing in the big state of Texas. We need you there. So I appreciate that. So for all of you out there, again, another edition of CareNet TV in the can, so to speak. Be on the lookout for new ones. We may be coming your way. So may God bless you daily as you serve Him faithfully in all you do.
Thank you.
Amen.